Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Sit with Stitt, a podcast where we take on important, taboo, and controversial topics and contend with them for the internet. I might not be super concise this week, as it's been a very spiritually impactful week, but it's also required a lot of investment on my part. I had a men's group Wednesday, men's group Thursday, Akashic Records reading Friday, Reiki 1 certification Saturday, and baptism Sunday. Then today I have a coaching and emotion code session, and tomorrow kicks off a intensive spiritual deep dive group at my business. And so all of this aligning, apparently, as the astrology people say, I'm not well versed, but with eclipse energy and big storm energy and all this stuff. So I believe that it's kind of providence and that all these things are supposed to be happening. But also, I'm still kind of in the rest and recovery phase of all the education I've been receiving. So, despite that, I wanted to go ahead and do a video because something has been on my mind a lot. I'm seeing a lot of synchronicities in it, which is the death ritual. This is not a video about grief and how to deal with death or even what happens after death. This video is about apoptosis and the death ritual in the sense of self-work. So at points in our journey, we have to bury parts of ourselves so that we can grow fully into what we are meant to be. I mentioned that I did a baptism Sunday. This is an example of a death ritual. I don't put my faith in a box. I still study other cultures. But the baptism for me represented a core belief in the way, the truth, the life of Jesus Christ, the importance of the fruits of the Spirit as laid out in the Bible, which overall basically just say to be kind and loving and control yourself and care about people and those sorts of things. And also an importance in the core belief that we should follow the instruction that Jesus left to seek ye first, or to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. For me, those ideas were enough to say, okay, this is my core, my heart, where Jesus resides, and I want to acknowledge him in that way, wash away a bunch of pain and old stuff. That for me did not say, now I will never study any other cultures or share what I learned from them. But still, it's a good way, I think, to bring up the idea of a death ritual, and it's why death rituals have been on my mind, because I deeply prepared for that one and wanted to be ready for it. In addition to the baptism, I have probably done at least 12 other death rituals in my lifetime. And I think that a disconnection from death rituals, from the tearing away of layers, from a disconnection from acknowledging the end of seasons, has a great deal to do with mental and spiritual unhealth in our world today. And I think it's worth taking a little bit of time to talk about. So, as always, I just want to go through kind of my experiences with death rituals, and then I'll try to come up with some closing thoughts. The first death ritual I ever experienced was kind of a culmination of my early grief experiences. I lost a very close friend when I was maybe 11. I lost my maternal grandfather, and a couple of other people, and all of those sort of rolled into this death of the part of me that believed I wouldn't lose people. In other words, somewhat a death of childhood. When you're a child, hopefully for a long time for most people, I mean, I hope that most people have the opportunity to exist in that innocence of not knowing, hey, like, you can lose people. Like, you don't get people forever. They go away at a certain point. And so I think when that happens, there's a certain innocence that needs to be buried so that you can move on. And for me, that was pretty early, which made me grow up fast and made me navigate some internal suffering and mature in a way that disconnected me from some of my peers that hadn't seen those sorts of things already. Because I'm looking around like, none of these people seem to know that, like, all those people you love could be taken from you. And so I had to go through, in that case, a long ritual, because I didn't know anything about spiritual work, so I just suffered with it for a while. But as I grew older and paid attention and remained observant, I learned to to knowingly participate in the rituals so that you have some control over how much emotion and energy it takes from you. At that point, I don't have all of the years, but I started just on my birthdays taking some time away to think about what has this year been for me. Like, we don't know if we're going to get another year or not. So what have I learned? And now I write that on social media. I just take a few minutes and say, hey, here's kind of the gist of what this year has meant to me. And for me, that is a way to not only acknowledge an ending, but also a new beginning. A huge factor in our relationship with death is that many people only consider death as a once-in-a-lifetime event. If you participate with intention in death rituals, then you should be going through those. I mean, for me, at least annually. At least annually, I'm taking time to say this season has ended, a new season is beginning. And so in that way, I have a healthier relationship with actual physiological death because I just see it as another new beginning. If you don't take time to invest in your relationship with that process of apoptosis, then you don't understand death the way it's meant to be understood. The word apoptosis is important because when you're in the womb, there's a certain point, this is just one example, but there's a certain point where your fingers are webbed. And the cells of your webbed fingers have to die away so that you can have functional hands. If you think about that in terms of a self-work or spiritual journey, you have to acknowledge what the seasons of your life are teaching you, and you have to bury the pain associated with the lessons. Keep the lesson, but bury away the pain and give it its acknowledgement. Write it down or whatever you have to do. Ceremoniously acknowledge it so that you don't have to carry all of the trauma of your whole life with you. The next death ritual after early grief that I probably experienced was getting out of the military, maybe. And anytime I do like a major professional shift, I still take time to draw away. In the Bible, so many times Jesus draws away. And I think that basically alludes to the fact that, hey, he's going away from people to acknowledge who he has been and what he is about to become next. I think it's so important in so many cultures, but even in the Christian culture. And I just I took a week. I probably spent some time in nature. I can't remember the specifics of it now, but I just took some time to process. I always say the process is to process. If you're not stopping at the end of seasons to give acknowledgement and to process what you've been through, your nervous system has never done that. That is absurd. Death rituals are so important. 2 additional important ones have been during the writing of my books, where I really put myself out there spiritually to try to take all of the information I've learned in my journey and put it down for other people, for my children, or just for other seekers. And both of the times that I've gone through an intensive writing experience like that, I don't write like other people. I can't write a chapter a day. It just doesn't work for me. I have to create a pocket, go into a very spiritual place, tell myself that I'm going to do this as an act of worship to my God and love for my family and love for my clients and love for people that I can help. And then I write the whole book in like 2 weeks or a month. It's just how it works for me. During those intensive periods, in the first one, Mentorship Matters, I wrote like 70 pages in 2 days, and then I got writer's block, and then I said, okay, this is the time for the unconscious to speak. This is the time for God to give me direction. And I go to sleep, and I dreamed of my own death. When you have a spiritual experience of death, it's pretty vivid, and it really makes you confront what actual death will feel like. And you can read about that in the chapter Memento Mori and Mentorship Matters. But basically, I had this experience with a sort of feminine, peaceful Grim Reaper character who showed up and was like, hey, you got to die now. And I was like, no, there's so much work to do. I haven't even written this book yet, you know? And the figure was like, hey, it's all good. You did what you could. Your time's up. And so having that experience and writing that experience and finishing that book and manifesting Mentorship Matters, when I finished it, I cried and I took time and I gave myself acknowledgement, not only for the dream that I dreamed, but for the product that I had built, for the thing that I had manifested. and I gave myself permission to let go of what's in the book instead of just carrying it around. And now I do that once a year now, almost. I mean, I did that 2 years ago with Mentorship Matters, about a year ago with Equilibrium, where I had another experience like that. And now we're coming into winter, and I'm working on my third book. So I have no idea if this will go perpetually for a year at a time. But as long as I have learned enough to try to write it down to help people, of course I'm going to do that. During my divorce, I had a death ritual where I use symbols to help my mind process what had happened. That's basically what a death ritual is. And in this case, this is maybe 2017, 2018 time frame. I had a unity candle that I blew out and lit 2 separate candles, and I read my vows, which were important to me at the time that I wrote them, and I burned them and kind of released myself from those vows, and I buried the ashes of the vows, and I buried my wedding band at the time. I buried them under a tree, and I let go of that. I took the time not to carry that with me. The essence of a death ritual, this is not some pagan stuff. This is still psychology. Not that it's wrong if it's pagan stuff for you. Do whatever you want. Use whatever culture you want. But the modern world does not give us enough ways to communicate with the unconscious mind, which is connected to your nervous system, which is connected to your fight or flight, which is connected to, everything that you suppress and avoid manifests itself. So the whole point of a death ritual is to peel off the layers of an onion, to go through the refining fire, to acknowledge the lessons that you've learned in life, and to bury the parts of you that aren't serving you, so that you can have the webs of your fingers die away, and you can become more of the person that you're meant to be. In essence, we're talking about shadow work, we're talking about self-actualization, we're talking about the whole self-work process. And in simpler terms, we're really just talking about maturing into adulthood. I think you can do that without the death ritual, but what the death ritual does, and another way to even look at it, is just winter. Every year there's a winter. Everything around us dies away or draws away. Nature itself rests and gives itself acknowledgement for what has been done in that year. It changes our relationship to time. I consider childhood, before I understood grief, almost to be a different life. I consider the time that I was in the military almost to be a different life. It would not serve me to have that as my entire identity as a veteran 7 years after discharge. People who get stuck in aspects of their identity basically live in trauma. You have to acknowledge your experience, but keep moving forward and keep deciding what you want to do next, and what kind of character you want to become, what sort of man or woman you want to become, and how you want to show up for your friends and family and community. The time before my divorce was a different life. In essence, for me, the time before my first book, the time before my second book. Because of that, time makes more sense. So many people go through life thinking that we don't have enough time. When you acknowledge the seasons, not only the natural seasons, but the spiritual seasons of your life, time makes so much more sense. And you also have such a deeper appreciation for symbols and experiences and lessons. And the appreciation for those symbols and seasons draws you closer to God, because it gives you a different kind of sight to where you're paying attention to the relationships in your life and when they end, and to the seasons in your life and what you're learning in them. It slows down your mind to where you can give the unconscious part just a little bit more acknowledgement. And you learn about seasons. You learn about how to manifest art. If I thought about whether or not I have time as an entrepreneur, a student, a father, a husband, a son, a very busy person, if I thought about whether or not I had time to manifest art around that lifestyle, no, I don't. I don't have time for it. But because I understand seasons and rituals, and death rituals in particular, I understand that It's okay to have periods of obsession where you stop thinking about clocks and you start thinking about matters spiritual. And that has empowered me to push through my rational brain limitations and to touch a spiritual part of myself and to help others bring out the spiritual part in them. For me, it has nothing to do with my faith and everything to do with my faith. Most Christians, I suppose, if you said, hey, how do you feel about death rituals? They probably think that was a weird question. But for me, this is about my relationship to myself, my relationship to God, and taking time to just acknowledge the experience he's given me. And so, like everything in psychology, we go back to the pendulum. If you avoid death, it changes the way you experience life. If you avoid apoptosis, you still have webbed fingers. Your hands aren't functioning as hands. You're still carrying all the traumas of your life with you. And the more you acknowledge death, the more you lean into it, and the more you bury the parts of yourself that are no longer serving you, the more you can appreciate the fruit, the marrow of life, the better you can show up for the people you love, the better you can worship your God, the healthier you can be, the less trauma you carry, which I believe affects you physiologically and clinically. So, death rituals, to me, are such a key component of psychological study. I keep mentioning the line because I think it's important that symbols are the psychology of the unconscious. I do not believe that our society is sick in the ego brain. In fact, I think the ego brain is like on steroids and is way too active. I believe that we're not giving enough acknowledgement to the unconscious and setting aside time to grieve, yes, and also to just acknowledge the end of seasons and to prepare for coming seasons will instantly make you a healthier, happier human, and it will instantly take so much weight off of your back, and it will reduce your suffering. So, in your self-work, please don't avoid death. It's just change. It's just a new beginning. And if you can get that one thing right and change your relationship with death, you will have such a richer and more beautiful life. You will have richer and more beautiful relationships, and you're going to fundamentally change as a person. Hope this has given you some food for thought. I know that I talked about doing scarcity mentality this week. I still will do that. But also, that's a really great death ritual too. And I will do some more tips and stuff on scarcity mentality. But everything that has impacted me the most has made me suffer the most. Suicidal ideation, scarcity mentality, trauma around abuse or even masculine abuse, those sorts of things, has required me to confront the problem so directly that it felt like a death ritual. By directly confronting suicidal ideation, I realized I didn't want to die. I wanted to live and make change. By having a bank account go negative and feeling humiliated as a man, I was able to overcome that trauma and realize sometimes surrender is the solution. And so now I don't carry around the scarcity mentality. Depression, severe anxiety, social anxiety, all of these things that have plagued me have required me to undergo a death ritual, and following the death ritual, I have been resurrected as a person who doesn't suffer with that ailment. So, whether it's a baptism, whether it's taking time to write a synopsis of your year on your birthday, whether it's drawing away into a mountain cabin to go fishing for a week after your military discharge or during a shift of careers, or whether it's burning your vows after a divorce, whatever it is, give yourself permission to grieve, to acknowledge death, and to let the parts of yourself die that are no longer serving you. I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you next week for episode 8.